Confusion followed closely behind. I kept replaying the scene in my mind, trying to convince myself that I had misunderstood something. Maybe the messages were harmless, or maybe the pictures were from a harmless friend, I reasoned desperately. But every detail, every subtlety of tone, every word that flashed on the screen contradicted that notion. My mind couldn't stop analyzing the evidence, each moment drawing me further into the uncomfortable reality that infidelity was now a part of the intimate world of my family. I felt like an intruder not only in his secret, but in a universe that was once predictable and safe, now irreversibly complicated. At the same time, a deep sadness began to gnaw at me. I thought about my aunt, how unaware she must be, how she might be living in blissful ignorance, trusting her husband in ways that he had quietly betrayed. I could almost see her in my mind's eye, smiling as she went about her day, believing in a love that had quietly fractured behind closed doors. It was a painful juxtaposition, the warmth of her trust against the cold evidence of his betrayal. I felt the weight of empathy pressing down on me, as if I could feel her eventual heartbreak, and it made the anger I felt toward my uncle even more complex. This wasn't just a moral lapse. It was a disruption of a life, a network of emotions and commitments that extended far beyond the two people involved. Guilt became my constant companion as I pondered what to do with the knowledge I had stumbled upon. The secret felt like a living thing inside me, restless and impossible to ignore. I couldn't tell anyone yet, my parents, my siblings, no one. The thought of exposing it was terrifying because I feared the ripple effects it could cause. Entire family dynamics could be upended, and I would be the person responsible for revealing it. At the same time, silence felt like complicity. Every laugh, every shared meal, every casual conversation now carried a shadow of deceit that I alone knew. Carrying this duality, the desire to protect and the instinct to reveal, was exhausting. My mind and heart both seemed to fracture under the weight of a secret that wasn't mine to hold. Yet somehow it had become my burden. As hours passed, my confusion deepened. I found myself oscillating between seeing my uncle as a flawed human and as someone who had deliberately hurt others. I couldn't deny that he had reasons for his behavior, reasons that might include loneliness, emotional neglect, or a yearning for intimacy that he felt was missing in his marriage. Still, understanding these motivations didn't lessen the impact of the betrayal. It only made it more painful because it reminded me that people's choices are rarely simple, and their actions often have consequences that ripple outward, touching lives in unexpected and often tragic ways. I also became acutely aware of the burden of observation, the silent, invisible witness to another person's moral failure. I had seen a private world, a hidden emotional landscape that was forbidden, and now it haunted me. Everyday interactions with my uncle became tinged with suspicion and wariness. I found myself scrutinizing his words, his gestures, and even his silences. What had I missed before? How long had this been going on? The answers were elusive, hidden behind layers of deception that he wore like a mask. Night fell, and with it came a quiet despair. I lay awake in my own bed, replaying the images and conversations, feeling the weight of both anger and empathy. The initial shock had shifted into a complicated cocktail of guilt, sadness, and moral questioning. I realized that discovering someone's infidelity is not just about seeing an act of betrayal. It is about stepping into a world of emotions that are tangled, fragile, and deeply human. And in that tangled web, I was now entangled too, forever changed by the knowledge of a secret that had no easy resolution. As the initial shock and emotional turmoil settled slightly, I found myself trying to understand my uncle, trying to make sense of why someone I had admired and trusted would cross such a profound boundary. It wasn't easy. Part of me wanted to label him simply as selfish or deceitful, to cast him in the role of villain and close the chapter on the emotional chaos I had uncovered. But the longer I sat with the evidence, the more I realized that his actions were not entirely black and white. There was a depth of human longing, a layer of unmet emotional needs that explained his choices without excusing them. I began to see that infidelity often arises not from a desire to destroy, but from a desperate attempt to fill emptiness, a void that perhaps had been ignored or suppressed for years. I remembered how he had always seemed distant at family gatherings, how he would smile politely but rarely engage in deep conversations. His work stress, his constant busyness, and the subtle tension between him and my aunt, all of it had seemed normal to me. I had always thought of my uncle's house as a place of comfort and familiarity, a place where memories of childhood laughter and family gatherings lingered in the corners. That day had started like any other. I had gone over to his house to drop off some documents and spend a little time catching up. I knew he had been stressed lately, juggling work and family obligations, so I didn't think much of him retreating to his room for a nap. It wasn't unusual for him to take these quiet breaks in the middle of the day, but as I walked through the hallway toward the kitchen, my attention was drawn to a faint glow coming from under the slightly ajar door of his room. At first, I thought it was the light from a phone screen or his laptop, but something made me pause. A curiosity mixed with a subtle unease pulled me closer, and I hesitated for a moment before peeking inside. The sight that met my eyes left me frozen. My uncle, completely unaware of my presence, was asleep on his bed. Yet on the small side table next to him, his phone lay unlocked, buzzing intermittently with messages. I knew it wasn't my place to intrude, and yet the sheer intensity of what I was witnessing made it impossible to look away. Glancing at the screen, I noticed snippets of conversations, messages that weren't ordinary or innocent. They were intimate, flirty, even passionate conversations with someone whose name I didn't recognize at first. The way the words were typed, the choice of phrases, the way he responded with a warmth and eagerness that I had never seen in any of his family interactions, it all hit me like a punch to the chest. I felt a strange mix of disbelief and dread. I stepped closer, my heart hammering, and I saw pictures. Casual selfies, sometimes with arms wrapped around someone, sometimes exchanged in private with captions that suggested a closeness and affection reserved for someone he shouldn't be sharing them with. There was no mistaking it. My uncle was entangled in something secretive, something that I had only read about in stories or heard about in whispers. The realization was almost surreal, like seeing a side of someone you thought you knew entirely disappear before your eyes. It was hard to reconcile the image of the man who had always been a figure of respect and authority in my life, with this very human, morally complicated reality. And as I continued observing, I noticed more subtle signs of the affair, small notes hidden beneath papers, reminders of meetings or coffee dates, hints at a clandestine life running parallel to the one everyone around him knew. Each detail made my chest tighten, and I found myself grappling with a rush of emotions that were difficult to categorize. There was shock, certainly, but also an underlying sadness, an awareness that his spouse, my aunt, was completely unaware of this breach of trust. I wondered how long this had been going on, and whether his family had noticed anything unusual. The questions swirled in my mind, each one heavier than the last. Despite the initial shock, a part of me couldn't stop observing. It was as though I was trying to piece together a puzzle, seeking context, trying to understand the what and the why of it all. I noticed his body language even in sleep, the slight tension in his hands, the furrow in his brow that betrayed a subconscious guilt or perhaps worry about being discovered. It dawned on me that infidelity, though hidden, casts shadows in ways that are often subtle but deeply telling. Even in a moment of rest, the secret lingered, leaving traces of unease that someone else, even unknowingly, could sense. I slowly stepped back, my mind racing, my heart heavy with the weight of the knowledge I had accidentally stumbled upon. I realized that life as I had known it in my uncle's house had shifted in an instant. What seemed like a normal afternoon now held the complexity of secrets, hidden desires, and emotional betrayals that I wasn't sure I was ready to carry. I left the room quietly, but the images and the words lingered in my mind. A silent reminder that sometimes the people we think we know best are capable of choices that leave entire families in a state of quiet upheaval. The moment I stepped out of my uncle's room, a storm of emotions hit me with full force. My heart was racing, my mind unable to quiet itself. and a heaviness settled over my chest as I tried to make sense of what I had just witnessed. Anger was the first feeling to surface, sharp and consuming. How could someone I had trusted, someone I had admired and loved as family, betray the very foundation of their marriage? The sense of moral outrage was overwhelming, yet it was tangled with an equally strong thread of guilt, because I had intruded, even if accidentally, on a deeply private part of his life. The knowledge was now mine, and with it came a responsibility I hadn't asked for.